we're going to talk about today, which is return to joy from some uncomfortable emotions. Okay. So these 6 emotions: sad, fear, anger, disgust, hopeless despair, and shame. What if I told you that these as emotions are hardwired in each of us and they're actually gifts? They are actually gifts for us. Now, some people label these negative emotions, and I really struggle with that negative emotion thing because, especially if we're going to begin to believe that these are gifts, they are not negative, but they are uncomfortable. And so you'll hear me refer to them as uncomfortable emotions because, let's face it, these are emotions we really do not like to experience. They are not fun. Feeling anger. Does anybody like to be angry? No. Does anybody like to feel hopeless despair? No. They are not fun at all. So please hear me when I tell you that what we're talking about today are the emotions, and we're going to dig into that in just a minute. So these emotions, feeling these, is not meant to be judged, and you do not need to be delivered from them. When you say, I feel afraid, that does not need to trigger someone saying, there's a demon on you and I need to deliver you, right? Come on. Anybody experience that? I've experienced that. Or hopeless despair. You're depressed. That's a spirit. Whoa. I'm feeling a little hopeless, right? And so these emotions that we're talking about today, you don't have to judge them. They don't need to be judged by anyone else, and you don't need to be delivered from them. Because again, they are gifts. We are hardwired with each of these emotions. So I'm going to define these for you. And these definitions come from Thrive International. They've done a lot of work on healthy emotions, and I really love all of this. So sadness, the definition of that is I've lost part of my life. There's grief there, right? Like I've lost something or someone that is important to me. The emotion of fear. I want to get away. That's that flight thing. I am afraid. I want to get away from this. Anger, they define that as I must protect myself and make it stop. Ooh, man. That just hits me because we have misdefined anger so much, right? And disgust. This is not life-giving. You guys, this was one of those emotions for me that took me a minute to recognize I was feeling it. And I was feeling it inside of a relationship, actually. I was like, what am I feeling? Because I was kind of like, ew, like that. Like if I had to put a word to it, it would have been, ew, I need you to get away from me. And I realized, I'm feeling disgust because this conversation, it's not life-giving. And so I'm repelled by it. And then we have hopeless despair. Now listen to this, guys. I lack the time and the resources. Do you see how hopeless despair is not depression? It's not, it doesn't have to go to this deep, dark place. It can really be in this situation. I lack the time and or the resources to come to a solution, to figure this out. I don't know what to do. And that emotion we can call hopeless despair. And then last, but certainly not least, is shame. Shame is saying it's not saying, I'm not bringing you joy and or you are not glad to be with me. So it's a misattunement. A misattunement. We are misattuned. We are out of alignment. That can cause us to feel that emotion of shame. Now, if you've sit with Coach Rebecca for any length of time, you will likely hear her say emotions are indicators, right? They are pointing us to something's going on in our soul. Something is happening here that our soul needs attention. I recently saw this on Pinterest and I love it. So I'm going to say it this way. Emotions are like children. You don't want them driving the car. but you also shouldn't lock them in the trunk. Anybody with kids knows that. Right? So they're not in control of our lives, but we're also not stuffing them back. So whenever we experience any of these emotions, any of these 6 uncomfortable emotions, it's actually an invitation for us to connect. Oh. When I first heard that, I was like, say what? My emotion of anger is an invitation to connect with who? Like, how? What does that look like? Or even fear, right? This I have to get away. That does not feel like an invitation to connect, but it is. They are hardwired inside each of us in order for us to connect. So what if we saw these 6 uncomfortable emotions as little islands? So we've got a little circle of islands, right? And you've got your fear and your sadness and disgust and anger and hopeless despair and shame. And they're islands that honestly, we're going to visit throughout our lifetime. It's part of our human experience. And I got to tell you, when I started looking at it this way, all of a sudden, I wasn't afraid to feel anger. Or I wasn't afraid to feel then misattunements, the shame, right? Because I was like, oh, I'm going to visit that island. That's part of my human experience. I'm going to visit that island, and that's okay. So it's expected then that each of these emotions are going to be part of my life. And I'm honestly going to visit them several times throughout the course of my life. Unfortunately, I can't just hop to anger once and never go back there because it's going to come again. Now, if we have this circle of little islands, I want you to imagine in the middle of all these little islands, there is a large island. And that is the island of joy. And I mentioned there's so many little nuances of joy, right? So what we're talking about with joy in terms of our emotions is actually, it's the place where we can act like ourselves, our true selves. We would say it's your unshakable life, right? I can show up authentically me. And so the joy island is big. It's big. And joy, that kind of joy, I can act like myself, is actually built in secure, attached, and loving relationships. It is not built in isolation, which is why we have community, right? And those relationships are the relationships that we practice when we got on today that say, I'm happy to be with you. Ed Kohori he says, you are special and favorite. And I love that. Like whoever I'm sitting with, I want them to feel special and favorite. So that's the type of joy that we're talking about that allows us to be who we are. And so on each island, in each emotion, I don't have to be afraid to visit it because there's actually a bridge that is built to bring me back to joy. And we see this in infancy and in babies, right? Like my favorite story, I can't remember where I read it, but they talk about like a toddler putting their hands in their diaper and then bringing to mom, like, look what I did. And mom's immediate reaction is what? Disgust, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is not life-giving. Get away from me. And then the sweet toddler reads the disgust and flips into shame. Like the emotion shame comes up because, oh shoot, you're not happy to be with me. You're not proud of what's all over my hands, right? And so the toddler will run away and hide. A mature mom will pursue the toddler because she knows how to return to joy from disgust, right? To remain her relational self and come back to, as your mother, I'm going to clean you up and this is going to be gross, but it's going to be what it is and we're fine. And so she pursues the toddler while she's cleaning the toddler up. He learns to build a bridge back to joy from shame because, oh, I thought you were not happy to be with me, but now together we're building this bridge back to joy where we can both be ourselves. And so it's so fun to look at how we see that in our younger years. So remember that joy is not happiness. We're not talking about, I feel happy, but it is the place that you can act like your true self. And the bridge back to joy from each of these uncomfortable emotions is not something that you can construct on your own. In the story of the toddler with the shame, the toddler needed mom to pursue and teach him how to return back to joy, how to return back to who he truly is. And so it does require secure relationships in our lives to build the bridge back to joy. And a note on those secure relationships, I have read that it's been said difficult things become trauma when we don't have someone to share them with. Let me say that again. Difficult things or experiences that we have, they become trauma when we don't have someone to share them with. And so for me as a mom, that gives me a lot of hope because I cannot protect my kids from difficult things. I cannot. I can't put them in a bubble. I don't know what's going to happen to them. But I can ensure that they have a place to share that with. I can ensure that I create that space for them to share what's happening. And so then it doesn't become something they have to carry alone forever. It then becomes trauma that has to later be healed. It is something that they can get out in the open right now, and we can work through and process. So when we don't return to joy from these uncomfortable emotions, that is when we get stuck and the emotions get bigger than us. So let's imagine for a minute you visit the fear island. I'm afraid. And that fear is I need to get away. So something happens that triggers the emotion of fear. I need to get away. I'm afraid. And you don't have a bridge back to joy. As you stay on fear island, fear becomes the way that you think. Fear becomes the way that you see the world. It becomes the way that you see yourself. It begins to affect every relationship that you have and every choice that you make. You see, when the emotions become a thought pattern, it then becomes a lens through which we see or hear through. And then we will require more intervention than just an invitation to connect and remember who you are. And so that is where things like coaching come in handy, right? Like, I am stuck in fear. I'm seeing through fear. I can't get out of fear. That's why sometimes when someone says I'm afraid, we get the you need to be delivered, right? And so there are instances where that happens when we don't have a bridge back to joy. So I'm going to tell you, if you recognize yourself in that example, you're like, I've been hanging out on fear islands and I'm seeing through fear. It could be any of those 6 uncomfortable emotions. I'm going to encourage you to schedule an inner healing session with me, okay? Because I'm going to teach you how to build a bridge back to joy. And we're going to have a healthy expression of emotion, not one that is bigger than we are. Okay, so we're talking about building these bridges back, but how do we do that? Because we're going to experience each of these uncomfortable emotions. How do we build a bridge back to joy? First of all, you have to recognize which island you are on. What emotion are you feeling? How are you experiencing it in your body? We have to know where we're at. So it's okay to say, I feel shame. It's hard for me to make eye contact right now because I'm embarrassed. I'm telling myself that you don't want to be with me. And I got to be honest, I was feeling this last night. I was feeling this like out of alignment, misattunement with, I was like, I don't think I am in tune with anybody. But I had to recognize, oh my goodness, I'm experiencing the emotion of shame and I'm feeling it in my body. I'm feeling it through an increased heart rate and just this sinking feeling in my stomach. Like, oh, I've let people down. So we recognize what island we're on. And then this is the fun part for me. We get to choose who to stay connected to while you are experiencing this emotion. Okay, so you're going to look for someone to be connected to in the midst of your emotion who is, first of all, happy to be with you. That might require a check-in. Hey, do you have the capacity for this right now? because I'm feeling something and I need you to be happy to be with me, right? Like, let's just clear the air. Because if they're not, that will cause more pain. So checking in, that's a step of attunement. Do you have time and space for this? And it's honestly best if it's someone who has some maturity and some patience. You're not going to go to someone much younger than you, or who doesn't handle their emotions well and say, "Hey, I'm feeling ashamed." That's not going to help. So that being said, when someone comes to us with a big uncomfortable emotion, we do get to be there for them in that moment. We get to help them build that bridge back to joy. And just another side note is, because I said you got to choose who you're going to stay connected to, right? And you want to choose someone who's happy to be with you. So after choosing who we're going to stay connected to while we're experiencing this emotion, the third step is to share the emotion with your connected person. Now remember, this prevents it from becoming trauma that needs to be healed later. And so as you share, I encourage you, and this takes practice, you guys, and I'm not good at it yet, I'm still learning, but I encourage you to focus on the emotion and how you feel, not on the situation that happened that led up to it. Because that's when it gets tricky. That's when we get slippery, right? When we're like, well, he did this and it made me feel, because no matter how good or mature someone is, it can be really easy to flip into, why did he do that? He should have done that. And so when we're sharing that emotion, we're focusing on that emotion. And then allow that person to attune to you. And we've talked about attunement a lot, but I just want to give you a couple of phrases. That could sound like, this feels really big to you right now. Or I can tell how upset you are. Or I hear that you're feeling afraid. Really simple. We're not looking to be fixed. We're not looking, we're not a problem to be solved. If someone comes to you with a big emotion, they're not a problem that you need to solve. They're a person who's experiencing an emotion. And if they come to you, if they choose you, you have a beautiful opportunity to help them return to joy. But that's their bridge, not yours. So you can show them how to build it. And step one would be attuning. Man, that feels really big to you right now. I see you in this. So after you share the emotion, then you can begin to determine what it is like you to do in the situation that triggered that emotion. And so this is where we need the other person to speak truth over us, remind us of who we are. What did you do? How did you handle it, right? Like, what would you have done differently? Who are you in this situation? Who do you want to be? There's also the point of helping another person can help put that emotion into perspective. And so when it feels really big, right? Sometimes putting that emotion into perspective can sound like this. I know you are feeling misaligned in your marriage, but I also know that your husband loves you and he is growing too. And so sometimes we have to be able to add that comfort. Like, I see you and I hear you, but also remember, this isn't huge. You're not going to drown in this, but I can help to put this in perspective. So we're not diminishing the emotion, but we're bringing it down to a manageable and appropriate state. And then finally, you will be able to make sense of the situation in a way that is consistent with the truth. And only now will you be able to correctly interpret the meaning of the situation. Oh, anyone else misinterpreted situations in the past because emotions get big and out of hand? Yeah. And then we attribute meaning to it. And then it affects everything moving forward, right? And then eventually we have to go and heal from that and probably apologize and make amends. But it's only after we share this emotion and we start to bring it down to size that we can make sense of the situation and interpret that correctly. And with each emotion, each island, if you will, doing this with someone you love and trust will teach you to build a bridge back to joy. And the good news is, you guys, eventually, for some of these emotions at certain times, depending on how big they are, you'll be able to walk the bridge that you've built on your own. And there are so many stories of returning to joy. I was feeling this way, and I took a minute to breathe, and I connected with myself, and I recognized my emotion, and I was able to determine who I am in the midst of that and not believe the lies, right? And so we get to practice this. It's almost like that muscle, right? But it's like if you can see it as a bridge, once the bridge is built, you can walk back and forth on that bridge and feel safe there. And so there's an opportunity to learn how to do this in the context of relationship and community, but then to practice ourselves, because then we get to help teach others. Here's how you can return to joy. And remember, the joy that we're talking about today, although very multifaceted, is really, I can show up as my authentic self. I know what it's like to be me in this situation, and I'm going to show up that way.